Julian Clegg.
Start your day with BBC Radio Solent.
Now, this morning, as we heard in the news with David a few minutes ago, the inquiry into the contaminated blood scandal described as the worst ever NHS treatment disaster. We'll begin hearing from those affected all this week. It's going to be looking at how patients were given infected blood products during the 70s and 80s and how authorities responded and whether there was a cover-up. Now, thousands of people are believed to have been infected with HIV and hepatitis viruses. Many have since died, sadly. Jackie Britton from Porchester was infected with hepatitis C after being given a contaminated blood transfusion at St Mary's Hospital in Portsmouth back in 1983, and she joins me on the line now. Morning, Jackie.
Good morning.
Thank you for being there. And also, let's bring in Alan Vickers from Portsmouth. His wife Sally sadly died 18 months ago, aged just 56, also infected with hepatitis C as a result of contaminated blood transfusion back in 1982. Morning, Alan.
Good morning, how are you?
I'm very well. Thank you both for being there. And Jackie, just to come to you first, I know you were given this blood transfusion to save your life, but it's been a nightmare, hasn't it?
Since 2011, when I was diagnosed with the Hep C, yes, it's been very traumatic, fighting for my 3 lots of treatment. We were on your show, myself and Sally. That's where I met Sally.
I remember.
And then sadly I was with Sally shortly before she died. And, it brings back that might be my fate whenever I go for 3 monthly cancer scans. I've got my next cancer scan next Friday. The week after, I give evidence this Friday. So, yeah, it's very real and very traumatic every day.
And Alan, I can't believe Sally isn't with us now, joining in this conversation.
No, excuse me.
I'm sorry, mate.
No.
Awful.
Yeah, I mean, it was quick. I mean, in the end, it was quick, but I mean, it shouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
It just shouldn't have happened. Sorry.
That's all right. It's I mean, this is just to come while Alan's just grabbing a tissue there. Let me come back to you, Jackie. This is the real consequence of this tragedy, isn't it?
That's right. Unfortunately, there are over 3,000 Sallys out there, haemophiliacs and people that have had transfusions, and there are still, we don't know how many more that are undiagnosed that had transfusions up until the 1991, 92, and they don't realise that they may be feeling sluggish, putting things down to stress and their age, and in fact it could be the Hep C silently attacking their liver. So again, as from when I was first diagnosed, all I want to do is make people aware that anybody that had a transfusion before 1991, 92 should really speak to GPs and ask to be tested.
Yeah, you said it. Alan, are you okay? If I could come round and give you a hug, I would. But no, I don't. But I don't blame you. And I mean, just explain for people how Sally's health and life, basically, and indeed yours, were affected when you received the news.
Well, we were just devastated. I mean, I was at work and I got a phone call to say that she collapsed at home. And I rushed home and we got her into hospital. And they did all these tests and they said, have you got any other problems? And Sal suffered with this thing called spherocytosis, which is a blood disorder. And they said, we'll check you for hepatitis A. We didn't hear anything for about 3 months, and then we went to the doctors and said, what's going on? Then he just turned around and said, you've got hepatitis C. And that was
just
it.
Like that?
Just like that. You've got hepatitis C.
Yeah.
And we thought, what? And Sal knew people through her life that had contracted it through injecting themselves. So she knew the consequences, and it was just devastating. It was just, we thought, I'd only been with Sal for about 8 months when we found out.
Awful.
And we went from laughing and joking to thinking, God, this is it. I've got a short term, that's it.
I said at the introduction, described as the worst ever NHS treatment disaster. Jackie, as you said, you're giving evidence on Friday. What are you hoping is going to come out of this inquiry?
Well, the one thing that came out of Penrose was that Scotland tried looking for all of those that had transfusions and testing them. I think a nationwide testing programme has to come up because, as I say, you can be misdiagnosed with so many things, and it's actually the Hep C in the background underlying it. So,
and you wouldn't know.
Stress it enough. You wouldn't know.
And you wouldn't know.
I put it down to so many different things, and I was just so shocked. I mean, I've had so many major operations since I was infected, and I always told them I'd had a transfusion, the date, so alarm bell should have rung, and it never was. So I assumed, because I'd had so many operations, I was clear. I knew about Hep C from a Nitorodic. And I thought, if I went and asked for a Hep C test, they'll think I'm neurotic because I've had so many operations. But unless you ask for that specific test, they don't test for it. And it should be tested for. It could have saved me from having cirrhosis of the liver. I had a major operation 10 years after I was infected, and it would have been picked up if somebody had said, oh, you had a transfusion in an at-risk period, well, I'll test you for this if that's okay. I would have gladly said yes.
Of course you would.
And I could have had treatment.
Alan, a final word from you. What are you hoping from the inquiry?
Justice. I just want somebody to be held accountable for from what I've said from the start, is I murdered my wife. The government murdered my wife through giving her contaminated blood.
Well, you two and I know, are going to talk again, and I want to keep in touch over the next few weeks. Obviously, it's such a tough time, because the other thing is you have to go through it all again as well as you're giving evidence. So, I mean, my heart goes out to both of you and to all the other people giving evidence. Alan, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I'm really touched that you're there, and also Jackie, lovely to talk to you again as well. Sorry it's in all these difficult circumstances. I wish you well, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very
pleasure.
much.
No, pleasure. Least we can do. Jackie Britton from Porchester and Alan Vickers from Portsmouth, whose wife Sally sadly died 18 months ago, just 56, infected with Hep C as a result of that blood transfusion back in 1982. If you want to talk about that, by the way, and it's affected you, you can always call us on 0808 100 3800, or you can email me, Julian Clegg at bbc.co.uk. And after 8, I'll be talking to Gary Webster from Eastleigh. Gary has haemophilia and was affected with HIV and Hep C after being given factor VIII, a blood clotting protein, back in the 70s and 80s. We'll hear more from him after 8 o'clock. Now, I don't know if you were listening an hour ago, but very, very moving when I caught up with two guests who I've spoken to before about the contaminated blood scandal. And there's going to be a public inquiry starting to hear evidence from witnesses today. And if you weren't aware of the story, around 3,000 people have died since the 1970s after being given infected blood in what's described as the biggest treatment disaster in NHS history. Now, Gary Webster from Eastleigh joins me now. He has haemophilia and was given blood clotting protein factor VIII in the 70s and 80s whilst at the Treloar College in Hampshire. And Gary, good morning.
Good morning.
Thanks for being there this morning. Just a bit of background. Tell me what happened, because you were a child at the time, weren't you?
Yes, I was, yeah. I've got haemophilia, had it since I was 6 months old. And at the age of 10, I went to Treloar College in Alton with 89 other haemophiliacs. And throughout the 70s and the 80s, we were infected with HIV, Hep C. And out of the 89, there is 16 of us left now.
Gosh. I mean, it was a very moving chat. I don't know if you heard earlier when we had Jackie and Alan on the show, and Alan's lost his wife, Sally, who was in the studio with me. Yeah. It doesn't seem so long ago. It's such a awful story, this. And I mean, for you, when you found out, how old were you when you found out? 18?
I was, 17, 18 when I found out I had HIV.
How did you cope with that?
Not well, I don't think at all, although I wasn't the only one, so there was a group of us, obviously, that all got it at the same time, so we supported each other. But you know, it really affected our lives up until the present, really.
Yeah.
And then we were told later, a few years after that we've also been infected with Hep C. But I think they knowingly knew they were treating us with certain products that had viruses in, because paperwork and documents have now been found stating that. And even though in my medical records it said I was diagnosed with Hep C in 85, I was actually told myself until the 90s.
And do you feel the NHS, the system, and politicians have let you down?
Absolutely. I think, putting it mildly, there was a big cover-up. They didn't want this to get out. And it's only because we've been pushing for this for years and years that we finally, today, see the start of, hopefully, truth and justice and, you know, them admitting, or them, the government, admitting liability for what's happened to thousands of people and, you know, 89 of my school friends.
Yeah, exactly. Can you stay there, please, Gary? Because I want to bring in on the other line Sue Threakall, who's the secretary of the campaign group Tainted Blood. You may well know Sue. And
I do.
I know you do. And her late
Hi,
husband.
Gary.
Hello, morning.
Good morning. And Sue, thank you for being on the show as well this morning. And your late husband was infected. Tell me what happened.
Yeah, he was. He was also a haemophiliac, a severe haemophiliac, and he was initially treated with the safe NHS product cryoprecipitate, which is basically fresh frozen plasma. In the 70s and 80s, as you know, they started using pooled concentrate, which was basically using donations from up to tens of thousands of donors. Because we couldn't produce enough in this country, we started importing it from around the world, mainly the United States, where they pay for donations. And because they're getting paid for it, you tend to get people, you know, who are desperate for money, like Skid Row donors, prison donors, and so on. There was a huge... I don't know how I can describe it, but a venture really in Arkansas prison, where the prisoners themselves ran the donation system, and you know, the people being what they were and in leading desperate lives were quite happy to give over and above the amount of blood they should have done. The result was that because they were very high risk, all of the products that came over here was infected with hepatitis C. Every haemophiliac in the country, that's about 5,000 at the time, got infected with Hep C. Most of them were exposed to Hep B, and a quarter of them also contracted HIV, as well as many other more minor viruses. And I say that a bit guardedly, more minor.
Yeah, well, it's been just catastrophic all the way through, hasn't it? Has there been an admission of guilt or an apology at all through this whole process?
Well, there's absolutely been no admission of guilt, because they know if they admit liability, then they are eligible to pay compensation. But we've had a couple of apologies, the sort of apologies which, to me personally, mean very little, because an apology is not worth anything unless you, A, understand what you're really apologising for. You've really got to grips with it. And B, you're going to follow that up with some substantial action. And neither of those things have happened. I mean, we hope that will come out of the public inquiry, but I think the government are going to have to be dragged kicking and screaming all the way. And I've said from day one that they are going to try every trick in the book to get out of this, because that's exactly what they've done for the last 30 years.
Terrible. I mean, Gary, you had to retire, didn't you? What was it, 2011?
Yes, that's right, yeah. I just couldn't physically cope with work. I had a full-time job for 20 years and then had to retire, yeah.
Let me ask, and I know we're going to catch up through this inquiry. For the moment, let me ask you both what you hope is going to come out of this inquiry. Gary first, what do you think?
I want liability admitted, and I want to find out why this happened, you know, to all these people, and make sure that it never happens again. You know, this is the biggest treatment disaster ever, and you know, something really should be done about it. Found out how it occurred, and you know, make sure it doesn't happen again.
Yeah. And I know, Gary, I can tell on the phone you're very upset about this, and I don't blame you. I'm thinking of you today.
Yes.
And are you going to be giving evidence, Sue, like the other guests I've been talking to today?
I'm not at the moment.
Okay. So, Gary, you're not at the moment. What about you, Sue?
No.
Yeah, hoping to, but like Gary, I haven't been called yet, but there's still a long time to go. They reckon it'll last at least 2 years, if not more.
So I suspect you probably both will. Well, look, I want to thank you for coming on the show today, and let's hope that they do sort this out, and at least, well, I say sort this out because they can't, but at least they can say something that will at least make you feel that they want to admit guilt. Thank you both for coming on the show today. I'm very grateful to you.
No problem. Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks,
bye-bye. So Gary Webster, Sue Threakall joining us today, and earlier we heard from Alan Vickers and also from Jackie, did we not, as well? If you want to talk about that or it's affected you, you can give us a call on 0828 100 3800 or send me an email, julianclegg@bbc.co.uk.
It has been described as one of the biggest disasters in the history of the NHS, and the public inquiry into the contaminated blood scandal will start hearing evidence from witnesses today.
This is the biggest treatment disaster ever. Something really should be done about it.
Gary Webster from Eastleigh, who has haemophilia, was infected with hepatitis C after being given a contaminated blood clotting protein. Thousands of people are believed to have been infected with HIV and hepatitis viruses over a period of more than 20 years. Many have since died.
I want liability admitted, and I want to find out why this happened to all these people and make sure that it never happens again.
Well, Liz Carroll from the Haemophilia Society says more help is needed.
The government have been providing some money, and today there's been an announcement very early this morning that some more money will be allocated to people. But we really don't think that that's enough. It doesn't end the means testing that currently happens for people. It doesn't support parents and children who were bereaved. So there's an awful lot more to be done for that.